Have you ever felt stuck? Have you ever felt lost? And stuck at the same time, where like it's been raining for at least 4 to 6 days of just heavy ass rain that just never lets up, and then you go for a walk and you're wearing your white shoes and then they just kind of get dirty? Well, same. And this podcast is here to help you realize that it sucks sometimes, but you can also have a good time with it. Here at the Sick Ass Podcast, we are here for you. And I'm also here for myself sometimes. What's going on, family? Just thought I'd try and inspire you all, just to remind you that that's what we're here for. We're here to get together, just have good times and just reminisce on times that weren't so great and reflect on those times and just realize, sometimes it's funny to look back at that sort of stuff. But then, there's just something about music that really puts you in that mood where you're like, oh yeah, everything's going to be fine. So before I get into what I was going to get into today, I had the most random throwback memory of whoopee cushions. Do you ever remember they had those Scholastic Bookathon book things, and you'd go home, you'd circle some stuff, and I'd circle everything, but I wouldn't really get any of it because you actually had to pay. Well, one time I actually was allowed, and I got this book. It's like Captain Underpants, and it came with a whoopee cushion as well. And I was like, could you imagine the person who invented the whoopee cushion? It pretty much does what a balloon does, but it's designed to be like a fart funny thing. But I remember when I got mine, and the pictures that it's like, oh yeah, put this under a pillow, and hilarity will ensue. That shit never worked. You put it under a pillow, and it's like, hey, can you go sit over there? And it never worked. It's almost like the only thing you could do is directly sit on it, or you have to push down on it, or if you put it under the carpet, you're like, hey, come step on that big bulge on the underground, and then it will go, and it's like, ha, you farted. But for something that has been called the whoopee cushion, that's just the fun, the laughter of the party, did no one ever talk about how good or bad it was? No, I don't think anyone really talked about that. So that brings me to this next part. Have you ever bought something from the Scholastic book thing, where it has that guy who looks like TJ Detweiler as the Scholastic thing? And you bought the whoopee cushion, or you bought the Spy Kids pack, and then you got it and it was nothing like you were expecting? Well, same here. And we agree that we are here to make this world a better place. So yeah, that was just a really random throwback, and I don't know what it has to do with anything, but sometimes, life is not what it seems. And so today's poem has to do with feeling lost, or feeling like you cannot breathe. Actually, I'll just read it and you can tell me what you think it's about. I feel suffocated. No matter how much I climb, I'm still at the bottom, and the ground is sinking in, and the walls enclosing are rotten. Every breath that I take scorches my lungs, and every thought that I have is a torturous one. I know this is bad for me, but I still let it be, and worry about everyone else, even though I'm my own enemy. Vivid pictures of scenarios that would never eventuate stop me from doing me, and then it's me that I hate. I close my eyes and focus on what matters the most, and keep pushing away all of those who are meant to be close. There's a heat behind my eyes as I try not to cry. It's not that I'm trying to hide, but I just have no idea why. It's not that my trachea closes shut and my heart feels like it stops. It doesn't matter what I do, I'm alone and feel so lost. And I think that's coming from an unknown person, and that's fine, because that unknown person is probably going through some stuff and doesn't want the fan mail that is going to come in with that beautiful literature right there. And I think that is a perfect encapsulation of a lot of what does start to happen when you do feel lost, or when you do feel like you're stuck and you're suffocating, where everything gives you that feeling like you're going to throw up or cry, and it's quite a heavy, a lump in the back of your throat. And I've talked about this sometimes when there's some things that when I wake up, or I haven't spoken, I haven't slept properly, or the next day there's something that I'm very anxious about, or something that hasn't happened yet. The anticipation of it happening is getting to me a little bit, and I'll have that feeling where I have shortness of breath. And it feels like I could possibly having a stroke, I feel very debilitated, and my legs start to get heavy, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through it. So I totally vibe with that one, and I really do feel the amount of heaviness that comes with feeling that sort of loss, with feeling that sort of suffocation, and it's a suffocation from your own mind a lot of the time. So what I want to do today is I just want to update you from with where I'm at, where I've been the last couple of weeks, and just it's been an absolute crazy time, and I crashed this week. So not crashed my car, but I just crashed. I physically, I mentally just broke down, and what I did was a huge reflection on what actually happened in that week, and then starting to think, what are the main contributing factors to a lot of it. So I think the first one is I was talking about an application that I was working on a while ago, and I think from there I was throwing my energy all over the place, and we all know that I like things to be structured. I like things to kind of go in a semi-linear fashion, or if it's not linear, there's actually steps put in place so that it can be kind of dealt with over a period of time. So I was working on a bunch of things. I was trying to get my application done, and that was, I think I was proud of the application that I ended up putting through. It definitely took me to another level of thinking that I haven't been at in a while, because I was kind of getting used to the different stuff that I was doing now, but then to put forward an application to kind of fund me for the next 4 years, I needed to think outside the box of what I've already been doing and try to think how I want to expand myself as a researcher for my career, but also think about the skills that I want to be taking out. So yes, you're writing a proposal for research that you want to be doing, but you also want to do things that incorporate you being uncomfortable. So you going to talk to different people, you going to learn different methods about things. So it requires that you are, putting yourself forward, and they have some sort of pathway or career pathway or trajectory that they can see as clear coming through in your application. So that was just a lot of thinking. I had to kind of go like multiple layers of, okay, if I do this, like this is an outcome for that, but then what about the outcomes for me, sort of thing. So doing that was a really cool way of planning and starting to think about my life a little bit more than just day to day, because it can get like that when you're surrounded by everything that you're doing. You can only start to think like, okay, tomorrow is more important than thinking about what each step is going to be for the next 5 years or so. So planning out my next 4 years in terms of research was really fun. I really enjoyed it, but it took a lot of energy. And I think another thing with putting in an application is that you're not guaranteed the funding, and there's the element or the vulnerability of possibly being rejected. So you put it in, and yeah, you can have a great idea, and I've kind of started saying to myself, if I don't get it, it's not a showcase of me. It's not because of me that I didn't get it. It's because the idea is not something that they want to fund right now. And fingers crossed, I can get some feedback from it to be able to strengthen it for another submission elsewhere. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and I think I'm in a better spot to receive that sort of. If I do get rejected, receive that, because I prepped as much as I could. I gave myself plenty of time to be able to get it done. I used all that time wisely, and I just, kind of got on top of it when I could. So I'm proud of that. To be able to get it off my plate was absolutely was a blessing. It was kind of so weird though. It was similar to how everything we talk about, we think that's the thing that's going to make you happy. And we kind of trick ourselves into believing that once this is done, the rest of you'll be happy again. But it kind of was the similar feeling that I had when I submitted my PhD, where it was just so anticlimactic. I was like, oh, it's done. And then I went through a spiral afterwards. But the thing with this, I submitted it. It was due at 1 p.m. and then I had to come up with a presentation pretty much immediately after to present the next day, because that's something that I'd neglected just so as I worked on my application. So, life goes on, you keep moving on and stepping through different things. So I haven't really, I wanted to give myself that moment just to be proud of the fact that, I submitted this application. It had gone through a bunch of my peers' eyes, and they all said, this is a really cool idea. It's something that is really, really beneficial. But yeah, we'll just see how it goes when the funders actually get back to us about that. So that'll be about November. So if there comes a title and it's just like dealing with rejection, we know why. So yeah, last week, we had Roy Burnett on, and I think that is an episode that most people should go to listen to if you want to hear what it's like for me to be with regular people and not talking to myself. Roy is one of my closest friends, and I think we chopped it up really well. She spoke very well, and she's got a really nice voice. I was listening to it as she was speaking, but then I also listened to it again, and just a really calming voice. I think it was really nice to listen to, but also the stuff that we get into on that. And another one is that I went back to Wellington and I went to my cousin's 21st. Now, I don't post too much about it, but like my family are gang members. I won't say which gang they belong to, but they are gang members. And this was a very heavily gang like 21st. Yeah, there's noises everywhere. There's the chanting going on. Everyone's wearing their patches, and it was an interesting time. Like it was, I'm pretty used to it now because I've gone to quite a few things where they're all there and they're all just being themselves. But seeing my cousin turn 21, and I remember him as a child and just going through that sort of stuff, and just talking to my other cousins who are also in the gang, and just telling me, what it's like to be a gang member, and how they always felt like, when you get drunk and you start talking about how you wish things were, or the misconceptions that a lot of people have of you. It's so heavy, but at the same time, it's really nice when they open up, and they're quite vulnerable, just saying how difficult it is that we had to find family through a gang because they felt like they had been they were the black sheeps, and they were just kind of reflecting on their life with me, and I thought it was really powerful. I thought it was very powerful because I think I've never had the misconstrued conceptions of them because they're my cousins, and when people say do you think they're scary, and like are you scared? I'm like, are you scared of your own cousins? No, they're just my family, and they just happen to like wearing those patches and like saying these words, right? So yeah, they were talking to me about being gang members. They were talking to me about what kind of skills they've picked up since being gang members, but also their values as community members. And that was, I think it was a real eye opener for me, just how that it could have been my life somewhere along those lines. Like if I hadn't gone through the procedure or gone through the steps that I had, to get out of the area that we were living in, then that could easily have been me. But their values, they're so strong in values. Like I think they have a better moral compass than a lot of people who say that they are good people. And these are people who apparently, according to everyone else, are meant to be some of the worst people in society. So yeah, it was really nice just chatting with them and just remembering that they are just people because they're my family. But at the same time, like, they've been done dirty in terms of systems and stuff that have been put in place to make them feel like that's where they had to go to, and that kind of takes me to some of the next work that I've been working on, where we're looking at just the environments that people live in terms of socioeconomic areas or socioeconomic families, and where people are clustering. And I was just looking at some of the data for Pacific and Māori, and I can't talk about it too much, but just in terms of some mental health conditions, but also like run-ins with the justice system, and like I think it was due to exhaustion for sure. I think I had been very, very tired, like working on my application, going away and still having to work to get it done because it was such a huge thing to do, and then having barely any time after that to reset and get into my next project. I just started tearing up because I was looking at it, and I just it just sucks because these are children or these are families that are having to go through these systems, and regardless of all the stuff that people say, like, why can't they just do this, why can't they just do that, and then we just look at it, it's like, well, they have done that, but that still hasn't changed anything. And it's just like, it's deeper than what is superficial. So it's deeper than what these families are actually doing, but it's actually what their foundations are. And the foundations are the stuff that's set by generations and generations of mishaps. But that's not seen in the data. If you look at it, like if you just look at it, you're just like, Pacific and Māori are way worse. But what we never kind of question is like, well, why is it that they're way worse? Is it because they're genuinely just worse off in health? I don't think so. I think it's more to do with colonization and just some of the systems that have been put in place so that they can't actually get a leg up. And if you want to talk to me about equality and equity, please hit me up because that's something that I can rattle off on every day of the week. But that really got to me, and I think I would always be upset having to read that sort of stuff because I don't, even though it's hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people that you're doing comparisons from, I've had family that have had difficulties with this sort of stuff, and it's easy to picture them because I can see them, or it's easier to picture them because I've lived through some of it. So I ended up just crying at work, low key, and just like looking at it, and then just had to, take myself away and question whether or not I'm doing this because I'm exhausted, or am I actually like fully upset. But after I had a really, really good sleep, I realized, I probably was just a bit exhausted. And at the same time, it was hurtful. But I've talked to some people about it, and they just said, it's nice that you are the type of person who is doing this work, because you're someone who will, go forward and give it the best that you possibly can. So anyway, we're about to get into today's episode, and it's about protecting your star player, and that is you. And we're going to start by looking at the energies that you keep around you. Let's get into it. Yeah. So you are your star player, but remember that you can mess yourself up by hanging around the wrong energy. And something I've realized recently is that there are people who absolutely zap me. And I've spoken about this a lot, but now I'm starting to talk about the vicious cycles that we can get into. And this is going to be really, really quick, because there's a bunch of things that can come into affecting your mood. And this, I was thinking about this when I, was at my cousin's 21st, and I was with my brother. And my brother is one of those people who just gives me the heartiest laugh. Like, he will just say stuff. He's just so quick. He's really good-witted, just bloody clever when it comes to his humor. But he gets the gut laughs out of me. Like, usually I'm a silent laugher. I'm just like I don't know, I sound like I'm choking. But when he makes me laugh, I laugh out loud, and I would sometimes lose my voice, but I'll also just get like the maddest ab workout. And like, just seeing him now and associating him with just like giving me those gut laughs, I just already feel lighter when I'm going to go hang out with him. But also, and when you're in a jovial state, and when everyone's in that kind of jovial state, you kind of feel that energy. You start to, feel, okay, if these people are in that happy mood, you start to feel it. And then I started thinking more and more about this, is like the energy that you're surrounding yourself with is obviously going to have an influence on you. And people have known this for years, and it's kind of been shown in the entertainment industry. So I just started thinking about laugh tracks, because I remember seeing, those videos where like they'll take out the background music and you just hear it's like really awkward, or like they'll do a joke. So if you watch any sitcom that you watch, and they have a laugh track in the back, so they'll have like Friends, for example, and they'll just be like, oh yeah, well, I didn't even know it was Friday today, and then usually it'll be like a laugh, like ha 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 ha. But it gets awkward, because sometimes like they take that out, and then it's just awkward. It's not a funny moment anymore. But you only laugh because you have the laugh track that influences you to be able to do that. Now, that was something that was made popular around the 1950s. A guy named Charles Douglas, or Chucky D. I don't think they called him Chucky D, but I'm going to call him Chucky D. Used to record comedian sets or mime sets. Mime sets, I think, a bit more, because, you don't have to chop and change from when they speak to when it was just the applause. But what they did was they would just get that, and then they'd start to put it into TV sets. And that was kind of what changed or revolutionized modern day entertainment, I guess, because like now you can influence the way that people think or people feel, and that's kind of like basic psychology, is just knowing that when you're in a room with a bunch of people, you kind of have that herd mentality to do what other people are doing. And if you don't believe that you can get influenced very quickly, think about the people that you hang out with, and think about the phrases that they say, or the mannerisms that they have, or the way that they dress, or the types of stuff that they like. You probably carry a lot of those things. A lot of people say that you're like a culmination of the top 3 people that you hang out with, or something like that. But it happens. And I know that there's been some research on it, where they'll just get people to come in, and they'll have actors put in, and they'll just be there, and they'll like say some people who just like scratch their face or tap their foot. And what they would do is they monitor, like, did that make the other person scratch their face or tap their foot? And they've just kind of had solid evidence that it seems to be the case. And we just pick up on it. And I don't know what it is. Like, I don't think anyone's ever been able to explain what the phenomenon is. But I'd say in most cases, it's just so that you fit in. You don't want to feel different, because we need to have, that's that survival instinct of being able to fit in. So all I'm trying to say here is that we are heavily influenced by what happens around us. So, having that hearty laugh, but also seeing the mood of everyone else. Like, you become funnier if a whole room starts to laugh, because like then it will be like a chain effect after that point. Everyone will start laughing. So being with my brother kind of brought that out in me. Shakespeare even knew this, so if you probably don't even know this, but I used to be in the Shakespeare Society when I was at high school, and this is not what we did because we were just absolutely classy, but Shakespeare at the different plays, because they're in broad theaters and stuff, like you need to be able to carry emotion all throughout it. So they would plant people in the crowd at different spots in the crowd who would start the emotion to make sure that whatever beat was being played, not like a beat as in like a proper beat, so the emotion of whatever that stanza is, they would like plant someone who would start the laugh or would start like an oh, or like, start to bring some sort of emotion to make sure that everyone else was picking up on whatever that emotion was and then relaying it, and then that kind of spreads that emotion all throughout the theatre. And this, my friends, is called emotional contagion. So emotions are contagious. And I guess this is where the terms like toxic come in, because, when you think of toxicity, it's something that fills a room or it fills you, and the more toxic something is, the worse off it is for you. I'm not saying that emotions are toxic, but I'm just saying like that contagion aspect, that aspect of being able to pass it on to other people, and especially if it's a toxic behavior or a toxic emotion, then that's where it starts to become, the high level of toxicity. So everyone you surround yourself by can kind of add to this emotional contagion. And this is not just people you surround yourself by, but things that you read. So your diet, your media diet as well. Like a lot of that stuff can come into who you are day by day, or even just how you then carry yourself into the next interaction. So experiencing, like I said before, can be made so much more intense if everyone else around you is experiencing that same emotion. But in that, what we don't realize is that we have this unconscious copying of others. So being around someone who would do something would make you like more likely to be able to do that something, and that is something that I've spoken about before. But in the same way, what we can start to see is that like recently, with social media, because what I'm starting to see, I'm not going to say like it's work or anything like specific, but what I'm starting to see is, some of my people that I talk with who get very, very upset with, emails that come through or social media posts and the different comments on it. Like a lot of my conversations over the last couple of weeks have been to do with stuff that has been happening online, which I think has a flow-on effect, and it's one of those things where now, so how sometimes you're roasting your friends and like you just roast your boy real hard, and it might be hurtful in that moment, but it's not something that lingers too long because the frequency of it was like in that moment. It was shared in the context of whatever that was. But now we're starting to have texts, emails, social media posts, and all that sort of stuff that last forever. And perhaps because the non-immediacy of it sometimes, like someone might write a comment in a heated moment and then someone might read that, but they might read it like a week later, and then it comes with the same emotion that they had when they were writing it, but then they read it and then they're like, oh my gosh, and it gets them all mad because they weren't in the heat of that moment. So the frequencies now are longer. We get to experience it for longer, and it's probably taken out of context a lot of the time. So when people are going back and forth on the internet, that stuff that instead of just being only a feud while you're typing on the internet, it also lingers with you later because something can bring it up that can remind you of it, and that can then have a detrimental effect on you for the long term. And I think this is what, with emails as well and text, this is stuff that you can always go back and read to. And I think some people say that you can't read emotion during text, or you can't read emotion during emails, which is like, you definitely can. Because I pick up on emotion when people text, and I know whether they're okay or not, or I know if they're trying to be a smart ass or something. But I think that the thing that definitely gets you after that point is that you have the time to be able to construct it, but then you also have the ability to be able to go back and read through it, which is what brings that anger back up, and that kind of, brings that bad energy, that negative energy that you didn't want to have. And it's easy to blame the other person for you then being in that state, but at the same time, now you have to be able to deal with the state that you're in. So the different frequencies, you can come to it in the wrong time, like I said before, but the conversations that you have where you're roasting each other, or you're actually giving positive feedback or negative feedback or constructive feedback, that's only in that moment that you're going to be there. So I think we need to be a bit more aware of the stuff that we are consuming. So that's the first one in terms of the bias that kind of happens if you're reading something. And just remember, some of these people that comment on stuff have no lives, or they actually definitely have no lives because they're bots, right? So we have absolute randoms who now have this ability to be able to just make us so mad because they're out there to, like, trolls. There's trolls out there who are out there to actually try to make you angry. So I think choosing who you engage with, and that's online. But then some of the emails that come through, we don't always have to read it in a negative tone. And at the same time, you can ignore emails if you feel like they don't address you the way that they need to be addressing you. And these are things that I'm starting to learn now, because people will just assume that, I think if they talk to me in person, they would never talk to me like they do through email. So I'm just like, well, if you want to, meet up and talk about it, then let's do that instead. And then it clarifies everything. So I think before we get too mad about that sort of stuff, we just have to remember what it actually does to your energy if you let that occurrence happen. But I think what we are able to learn from that is that we can react in a more positive way. Right? And when you do react in a more positive way, like I said before, we could either ignore it, or we can actually feel like, we don't have to buy into that sort of stuff because we're aware of the emotional contagion that comes with it. But I think because of how a lot of people are not as self-aware, we don't realize when we're putting this onto other people. And what I've started to notice in definitely the workspace, but definitely in places where I have to share. So there's been a few things that go on where, people want me as like a mental health advocate, all that sort of stuff. But if I don't feel safe, if I don't feel like, if I feel like I'm under the pump, or there's like a lot of bad mood around with different people, or like the mojo's just not there, then I'm not going to share, or I'm not going to do my best work because I just don't feel like we set up for the right context for it to actually occur. And I think about this with my interviews that I have with different people, like instead of saying, tell me, I'm just like allowing them. I'm just kind of like trying to set a mood where it's peaceful. And I think that gets you a better reaction than people just wanting stuff from you. So yeah, that's that. We can react in a more positive way just by being like, yeah, okay, that's them. I don't have to take this on, because we realize just how, even through other medias that are not to do with like face to face, we can still carry that with us, and that probably has a negative effect on us long term, because this is where I'm starting to talk about the vicious cycle. If you're not aware that any of this is happening, you could probably, and this is me saying you, but I'm talking to myself, would go in with the shithead mentality that, everyone else is actually being shitheads, but maybe I came in as a shithead, which other people picked up on, and then they started being shitheads, or they started being a bit more apprehensive around me, and then they come back to me, and then they're more apprehensive, and then I get apprehensive because they're apprehensive. Chicken or the egg? It might have actually been me who brought that in. And I think until I started getting a little bit more self-aware of the energy that I was bringing, because I always would blame it on other people. Like, I'd just say, other people are making me mad. But sometimes I would actually come in and I'll just have this preconceived idea of the people who are in there, and I just feel like they don't deserve my time. And then I would give off this real fucking stank vibe, to be honest, and wonder why, it was always shitty in there, why there was always a divide, or why it always felt like, people were uneasy or walking on eggshells. And it's like, well, I came in with that energy that probably made them feel slightly off, which then made them act or react slightly off. Until we're aware of the different energies that we put out, or until we're unaware of the different energies that other people are putting out, it's really hard for us to see where this sort of thing happens. And what tends to happen, I guess, is that we'll gang up on people, or we'll put the blame elsewhere rather than taking it into your own control. Because then if you just keep blaming a particular person or a particular couple of people, it's very easy to not actually have a reflection of yourself and be like, well, what energy am I bringing into this space? So yes, this is about protecting your energy, but it's also about being aware of how you kind of go into different spaces and the energy that you are taking. So I try to be a bit more calm with everything, and I try to be a bit more compassionate. That compassion that I've had for other people has absolutely been a lifesaver, and And like, I know there's people who are just not so nice, and they're always, probably not the best people to be hanging out with, but I always see, I always try to see that one part of them that possibly maybe it's a misunderstanding. But then there are just some people who are just shits. But anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to speak about today. I'm just saying my energy's everywhere. There are a lot of things that you can get caught up in and easily find that you could blame other people for it. But at the same time, kind of have a reflection of the energy that you put out. But also start to see, what circles are you in where you start to feel nasty? What circles are you in, or kind of just leave, where you start to feel like, okay, I'm putting this on other people as well. So that's me for today. Nice and easy. Just reminding you all that I've really appreciated the support over the last couple of weeks. If we can bump this up, I'll keep coming with those motivational little chats at the beginning. Oh, actually, you know what? Let's finish off with a motivational speech right now. Do you feel like you just listened to a half-hour podcast and not taking anything from it? Did you feel like the host was just drinking way too much coffee and came in super excited and had no idea what they were talking about? Same. We here at the Sick Ass Podcast absolutely understand that, and we will get back to you in 7 working days. I love you all. Have a great weekend. Week? I'm looking forward to getting more stuff out there. And yeah, anyway, love you.